Hello everyone, it's Whiskey11 and welcome back to the Gaming Lounge. In this video, we're going to be talking about integrated air defense systems in the context of DCS World. A couple disclaimers before we get going though. Number one, I am stealing Perun's format for this video because it just works for this topic, and no, I'm not going to apologize for it. Two, I'm not an expert at all in military air defenses. I also was not in the military. Everything you're going to see in this video contains publicly available information and my experiences looking at the Soviet era integrated air defenses in Europe. This is also not going to be an exhaustive look. If you'll pardon the pun, this is going to be more like a satellite view of what integrated air defenses looked like in the Soviet Union, although not exhaustive to just the Soviet Union. I also reserve the right to be 100% wrong about all of this. As I said, I'm not an expert, and I was never in the military, so I reserve the right to be wrong. And as a result of me reserving the right to be wrong, that gives you the right to ridicule me in the comments when, inevitably, I do get this wrong. Before we begin with this, I also want to thank 107th Joint Aviation Squadron's Recoil for his help in the creation of the Soviet IADS network on Google Earth. We've been working on it for the better part of a couple months now, and we finally are at a point where we're basically done with it. And it's pretty cool to see it all laid out, but we'll talk about that a different day. So before we begin, let's go ahead and talk about some definitions. IADS, Integrated Air Defense Systems, that's what we're talking about today. SHORAD, MEDRAD, LORAD, that's short range, medium range, and long range air defenses, respectively. C2 is going to be command and control. EW or EWR are going to be early warning or early warning radars. And then nodes is going to be a fire control sector of a integrated air defense network. In terms of basics, we have all of those components that we just talked about. So we have command and control, early warning radars, long range air defenses, medium range air defenses, and short range air defenses. All this is going to be working through communication through a C2 node by your early warning assets to have your best available SAM site engage whatever targets are actually coming in to attack you. And EWR can refer to more than just radars. It could be satellites, for instance, detecting approaching hostile aircraft or missiles. And in a real basic sense, all that's going to happen is those early warning radars are going to detect the target, send the information to the command and control, and then command and control is going to tell which SAM site to engage the targets. The targets are going to send their information back after the engagement, and then the command and control is going to reassess whether or not they need to ask anyone else to engage it, or if they need a reattack. So let's look at an example IADS. There's a couple of things with this. Usually it comes down to choosing a location of importance. That can be a city, military base, airfield, strategic resource, something that's important enough that we want to, set aside resources to defend it. And as a general rule of thumb, your longer range air defenses are going to be stationed closest to that location of importance. As you get further away from it, your anti-aircraft missile batteries are going to get shorter and shorter in range. That's not going to be necessarily the case in all instances. However, it does work out best in the long run for when you set up your air defense networks. It makes it very difficult to get through that first line, and then it gives you layers of protection as well. Your early warning radars are going to be placed such that your shorter range early warning radars are generally concentrated closer to the front, while longer range ones are going to be further to the aft. Again, this is not always going to be the case. There is some benefit to being able to see beyond your borders. And then finally, your command and control is going to be stationed near your location of importance, or at least in an area where they can't be easily taken out if aircraft or missiles or artillery were able to get through. So let's look at our picture here, and we're going to go through just a little brief scenario. So we've got our good guy air base there. You can see the way we have our IADS set up. Our shortest range stuff is closest to the border, medium range in the middle, long range towards the good guy airbase. We've got these 4 MiG-29s coming at us. As they approach, our early warning radars are going to pick them up, and they are going to relay that information to the command and control and say, hey, we got 4 MiG-29s coming in. They might not know that they're MiG-29s, but bear with me for a second. We got 4 aircraft coming in. As those aircraft approach and enter into the threat rings, basically they're going to enter into the engagement envelope of all of our integrated air defense network. Our short range, our medium range, and our long range systems are all going to be able to engage. So with that, the whole point of C2 is then to dictate which site is going to actively engage those targets as they come in. It may be something where our short range stuff can't even reach the altitudes that the MiG-29s are flying at. Might be something where maybe we want them to, make it into the medium range stuff and let our long range stuff deal with it. It's just a matter of choosing the right target based upon radar cross sections and all of that stuff. So let's look at a real one. This one's going to be in the East German, former Soviet Republic. And it's a very interesting layout. You can see at the very bottom of the screen, we have a Soviet air base. Our next line of defense is an SA-5 site. You can see there's also an SA-2 site there. And that's just because when the SA-5 came out later than the SA-2, and so they had built the SA-2 site. Now we're going to, go ahead and go out and actually build our SA-5 site for our longer range defenses. As we go further and further out, you can see we have SA-2 sites then, and then we have an early warning radar set up. And then finally on the coastline, we have an SA-3 site. Again, we chose that airbase specifically. And what's interesting about this setup is this is actually unusual for Soviet IADS, but that's probably a topic for an entirely different video. It's just a good example of the basic setup where your longest range stuff is closest to your location of importance, and then it steps down in range as you get further away. So let's look at St. Petersburg. So I've broken this down for you into their respective ranges. So defending a city is obviously going to be very different from a military base. We've got a couple different avenues of approach that we've really got to worry about. In this case, you can see the SA-2 ring in the left, the SA-3 ring, which is shorter range, but a newer system on the right. You can also see the early warning radars in there. And then finally, our SA-5s. You also note that there's the legacy DAL SA-5 Griffins located there. That is a system that never really saw any service and was particularly ineffective. NATO had already given it the SA-5 designation and decided to reuse that, but they decided to call it the SA-5 Gammon when the S-200 Vegas came online. So here's rolling it all together. A couple things that we can pull out from this that are key differences from the previous example of the East German Soviet Republic. Mostly in the fact that the air defenses aren't staggered at all. In fact, they're pretty much all online with each other, except for there towards the southwest. The SA-3s sit between the SA-2 sites, and that's kind of that alternating SA-2, SA-3 thing is something that the Soviets did all along the coasts everywhere, except for in Germany for some reason. I don't know why. We've got SA-5 sites inside and outside the ring. We've got EWRs inside and outside the ring. So it's just kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of a mess, really. I mean, it looks clean on this, but it's really kind of a mess. Now imagine taking this on in DCS World. What would you do differently than the previous setup if you were taking this on? Something to think about. Also, one more thing to think about is that in real life, pretty much all of these SA-2 sites have been replaced with SA-10s. That's scary. All right, let's look at one more. This is going to be the Moscow Integrated Air Defense sites. It's disturbingly satisfying to look at. You've got two concentric rings that are almost perfect. Certainly for the era, the late 50s, early 60s, it's about as perfect as you can get. This really represents the first attempt of the Soviet Union to actually secure their capital from air attacks. As the threats grew, though, from NATO, new systems kept cropping up around the city. We eventually started to see SA2 rings inside of the SA1 rings, and then eventually we started seeing them outside, and we saw SA3s appearing, and eventually SA5 towards, the late 70s and early 80s. And then the SA10 came out, and nearly every single one of these SA1 sites was replaced with some variant of an SA10, which is just scary when you think about it. And then finally, in the 90s, aughts, and teens, most of these S300P, either PS or PT variants, were replaced with S300 PM, S400, and eventually it'll be S500s. Pretty impressive when you think about it. A little bit different from our typical integrated air defense. So what does this have to do with DCS World? What I'm hoping to do is convince you guys that it's worth taking the time to add some form of integrated air defense setup to your missions. IADS isn't natively supported in DCS World, at least not yet. There are many different ways to script it, and I'm not going to go into the details of scripting for mission editing in this video, but I do want you guys to take a look at it because I think it adds another layer of depth to the game. Just as some advantages, a particular one that is very well known in the community is Skynet. Skynet has a bunch of improvements. Radars don't continuously transmit their location, and by their location I mean they just don't continuously transmit, giving away their location, unless they are an early warning radar. SAM sites do not turn on and engage until you're within their weapon employment zones. SAM sites, which cannot do missile defense, will shut down if they detect an anti-radiation missile inbound. SAM sites which can do point defenses can be set to only engage inbound weapons. You can also set up command centers which can dictate how the IADS behaves, specifically whether or not it behaves as the way the script has it set up, where they don't turn on the radars and stuff, or if it goes to the default DCS, or if it just shut down entirely if the command center is destroyed. The same is true of power nodes and connecting nodes. You can also integrate ships and AWACS into this same thing, and then finally you can actually have electronic warfare aircraft, growlers, prowlers in quotes, with jamming capabilities within the scripting environment, which adds yet another layer of depth to the game and can make it way more fun. So what does this all mean in general? Well, in real life, IADS kind of vary depending on what country uses them, but they all generally follow the same rules. You're going to have some place of importance. We're going to have a command and control node. We're going to have early warning radars, and we're going to layer our defenses such that our command and control node has plenty of options to address incoming threats. In DCS World, obviously the implementation of it in the game is very lacking, and I hope ED fixes that in the future. But in the meantime, mission planners should really look into utilizing scripting to address those shortcomings, just for the additional layer of depth. I can't stress how much of a difference it makes to do just a little bit of scripting to get an integrated air defense setup working. And if you want to go into IADS and make your own Skynet IADS and make your own sectors, it is crazy how in-depth you can actually get with an integrated air defense setup. And it's just a cool additional thing to it. Anyway, I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, let me know down in the comments. Like I said, if I'm wrong about things, throw that down there too. I look forward to those comments. You guys know the YouTube drill. Like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Thanks for watching.